Okay, kids, I hope you're paying attention. The memo is out. I'm a little behind now. It was released earlier today, and the truth is, I cut one of my bluffs earlier today about the memo, and I published it, and then I went to watch it on YouTube, and there was no audio. Now, if I were Alex Jones, I might actually blame the deep state and say that the FBI and the DOJ were surveilling me and that they sabotaged me to keep my message from getting out. But let's face it, I've got like 109 subscribers. We're getting there. But the memo's out. And really, I hope you're paying attention. This is gigantic. So I've got it here. We'll get into it a little bit. I'm not going to make this a very long one. I'm going to give you some thoughts. Then I'm going to show you some of my notes on the memo. And we'll talk about it in more depth on Sunday at 8 o'clock. But let's what this memo really is. We have all had some pretty serious suspicions about the whole Trump-Russia collusion thing. Everything about it has just been shady, dirty on the face of it, from the get-go. Now, there's all kind of problems. There's conflicts of interest all over the place. You've got multiple current former directors of the FBI, districts, attorney generals, deputy attorney generals, and obviously now, quite clearly, the entire Democrat National Committee is just corrupt to the core. The FBI and the DOJ clearly were corrupt at the very top. I do not say were because my faith in Trump is so complete that I expect he's already fixed it. I say were because in the past tense we have certainty, but there is no certainty about the state of the FBI and the DOJ now. Frankly, my faith in the DOJ, especially while Jeff Sessions is there, because he is so spineless, my faith in that institution is especially shaky right now. But the long and the short of it is that we've had all these suspicions. There's been a lot of speculation that this Steele guy, this ex-British spook, was crooked and corrupt and dangerous and individually and personally biased against Donald Trump and his campaign, working to sabotage the Donald Trump campaign, working in the Democrats like to use the word collusion, Trump-Russia collusion, and they do that because they've had no evidence of a crime. If there were actual evidence of wrongdoing, they would do what I'm about to do, and they would label it with correct terms as a crime. So what Steele has done is he has conducted espionage inside of the United States against the FBI, against the Trump campaign, and depending on this timeline, possibly against a sitting president. The thing that's new, the thing that hasn't been part of the conversation so far, that has come out in this memo, the crookedness, the problems with Steele, the fact that Steele was paid by the DNC, that we either knew it for certain because of examinations of financial logs and the like, and campaign finance disclosures. We either knew all of that or had speculated all of that. What's new is that Steele was having meetings with the press, leaking classified information to the press, which press organs used to generate newspaper articles, which the FBI then used as supporting evidence to buttress the Steele dossier, which has been widely debunked, widely and nigh entirely debunked, and then using that false dossier, that fabricated dossier, buttressed with newspaper articles. And when I say news article, and I use that phrasing loosely because we're talking about a Yahoo News article, right? So the Yahoo News article, and there was another article I forget where it was. I've got it highlighted in here somewhere. But there were a couple of news articles that were used to buttress the Steele dossier, and that was what was used to secure FISA warrants. This is actually more about Carter Page than about the targeting of Donald Trump. But if you really want to be sneaky about surveilling someone, you surveil the people close to them. Not that I speak from any particular experience. So, here's the memo. Here's the whole thing in its full 4 pages of glory plus 2 pages of prior disclosures and discussions. So we're going to skip. This is from Mr. Chairman. We're releasing the memo. These are the circumstances of declassification. This, where it starts off and at the top of the document it says secret no foreign. And the secret no foreign has been redacted. I have a copy of the full document with all the redactions still in place, and I'll be doing a little examination there and seeing if I cannot infer what those redactions must have been. I will not be sharing the redactions if I can decipher them through examination, unless I come up with something really earth-shattering that you need to know. The fact of the matter is, what is going to have been redacted from this is going to have, unless they're even more crooked than we already think, will have been redacted not to protect information related to the memo, but information related to sources and procedures. And that sort of stuff I will absolutely be keeping under my hat, because that endangers my brothers and sisters in uniform, whom I still love and respect, and for whom you should have the absolute deepest deference, and keep that shit in mind. Now, what this memo amounts to, though, is a statement. This is a statement signed by many high-powered elected officials, which essentially makes the claim that those suppositions that we have had about the crookedness, about the criminality, about the weaponization of the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation under the auspices of Attorney General Lynch, FBI Director Comey, and of course Barack Hussein Obama, that those institutions were weaponized against the American people, against individual and specific named American citizens, and against what would otherwise be a perfectly legitimate election. The fact of the matter is, this looks very much like the entire Russian collusion narrative, the entire Russian collusion investigation was literally fabricated in an attempt to sabotage the presidency of Donald Trump. So we have this bit about the FISA warrants. FISA warrants have to be renewed every 90 days. A FISA warrant is a Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act warrant, and just a little bit of quick history on these secret. A FISA court is a secret court. We are never supposed to know what happens there. That is only tolerable so long as the American people can have certain faith that that institution is not being abused. So what does that abuse look like? And I do mean to ask the question. I want you to answer the question. Drop it in the comments below. I'm not monitoring the live chat comments for this session. I'm going to talk to you, and then I'll read the comments and respond to them later. But what does the abuse of the FISA court look like? The FISA court should be issuing warrants in only the most particular cases of need. Our Fourth Amendment right to remain secure in our persons, papers, and properties must be sacrosanct. It must remain. Now, that is not the constant expectation of privacy. Certainly, if I am in a public space surrounded by people, I'm having a conversation with another person, even though that may be a private conversation, it is not reasonable for me to assume that my conversation cannot be overheard. But if I am having that conversation in a closed room, in an owned space, where the only interlocutor is the person that I'm speaking to, there are no audience, I should be able to operate under the assumption that I'm not being recorded or surveilled. Now, in many states, the one that I'm in now being one of them, we are a one-party consent state. So it is actually legal in this state for a recording of a conversation to take place as long as one party to the conversation is aware of that recording. Which means that if I am having a conversation with someone, I can record the conversation, or they can record the conversation, and we do not have to inform one another of that. However, if we're having a conversation, that conversation is somehow incriminating, a third party is recording that conversation without consent, unless that third party is law enforcement, who on a reasonable suspicion secured a warrant for that surveillance. Unless that is the case, then it is unlawful to record a conversation to which you are not a party. The Fourth Amendment must be sacred, and clearly it is not. You may no longer rely on the supposition that your conversation is not being recorded. You need to assume that someone is listening, that you are being surveilled. I'm not saying that you are. What I am saying is that the power and the authority to do that to you has been utterly opened. The protection of the Fourth Amendment that until recently attempted to guarantee that you are secure in your person's properties and papers has been repealed by fiat by this FISA court. More terrifying than that, in order to secure this warrant, which is spurious and shady the fuck at best, what we now have is a credible claim to the existence of evidence which is classified, but that proves that James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Sally Yates, Donna Buente, and Rod Rosenstein have all put their signatures onto requests for FISA warrants for the surveillance of private citizens and lied to the FISA court about the evidence that they had to justify the production of such a warrant. That's a huge deal. I think that's the biggest institutional criminality that is revealed here. Now, this right here. This is page. This is the second page. This is page 2 that we're looking at right here. Part of the lie is that by omission they have not included evidence that is favorable to the victim, that person being Carter Page. The dossier compiled by Christopher Steele on behalf of the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign formed an essential part of the Carter Page FISA application. Now, we know he was paid by the DNC. This says $160,000 was paid to him. But here's the thing that nobody's saying out loud, apparently. He was also a paid informant to the FBI. Now, hold on to that for a minute while I drop this on you. The Page FISA application incorrectly assesses that Steele did not directly provide information to Yahoo News. Steele has admitted in British court filings that he met with Yahoo News and several other outlets in September 2016 at the direction of Fusion GPS. Perkins Coie was aware of Steele's initial media contacts because they hosted at least one meeting in Washington, D.C. in 2016 and Fusion GPS, where this matter was discussed. So let me break that down for you, and then that'll be the end of what I'm going to talk about in this memo for tonight. What that says is that an ex-British spook was paid by the Democrat National Committee, the Hillary Clinton campaign, to generate the opposition research against Donald Trump that would be generally legitimate, except that in the course of producing that information, this guy was working for the FBI as a paid informant, and during that time met with Yahoo News, Fusion GPS, and the law firm for the Hillary Clinton campaign, which is, for all intents and purposes, the Hillary Clinton campaign. And then Yahoo News ran a story about Trump collusion based on classified information leaked to the Hillary Clinton campaign via her lawyers, the Democrat National Committee, Fusion GPS, and Yahoo News by an ex-British spook who was not only paid by some of those outlets to produce the information, but was paid consulting fees by the FBI to access the information which he then leaked. I swear one of the worst parts about this whole thing is that sentence right there, that convoluted, on-running monstrosity of a blatherskite fucking sentence was the most succinct way to explain this tangled web of just madness. The enemy is at the gate. Bullshit. They're inside. They're here. And they are a serious and lasting threat. They are a lasting threat of damage to our democracy, to our republic, to our liberty, to our prosperity, and to our posterity. They must be identified, and they must be nullified. Peter Steele belongs in prison. Christopher Steele belongs in prison. As do apparently just about every Democrat. Last week, or I guess this week preceding, this week, coming up to today, the DNC and the FBI both railed to prevent the release of the memorandum. A man who is not guilty of murder does not destroy the murder weapon. The crime of destroying evidence, and I've talked about this before, I've told you guys about this before, and I hope you've gone and read you some books, looked it up, so that you can call me if I'm full of shit. I'm not. I dare you. Bring it on. But the crime of destroying evidence, and I'm not saying that evidence was destroyed in this case. What I am going to suggest in just a moment is that they attempted to suppress evidence. That does not rise to the level of destroying evidence. But let me tell you a funny thing about understanding people. You have probably noticed in your life that people will make accusations and they will accuse other people of having traits that they themselves have. This is something that most people do. I did it myself before I was clued into it, before I became aware of it and understood how it worked. Excuse me. Without training, or at least some effort to understand this particular piece of human nature, this is a flaw of most humans. People tend to see in other people only those attributes which they are aware of in themselves. We are like the Indians that can't see the sailboats because we don't understand, because we don't know that they exist. We don't know what a sailboat is, so we can't see it. So a person who is manipulative will accuse other people of being manipulative. I'm not saying that that person is necessarily wrong, but a person who is not manipulative doesn't have that in their lexicon. The idea of other people attempting to manipulate you constantly isn't part of your worldview. It's not an attribute that you're looking for. A person who sees anger in people constantly, if they're not a clinical psychologist or some sort of professional analyst, some sort of trained analyst, then it's more likely that they're projecting. They are seeing in other people attributes that they dislike in themselves. Collusion? That's an interesting word that the Democrats chose to use. It's a very interesting word. This does not look to me like collusion, because collusion is not a crime. This looks to me like espionage committed by an ex-foreign intelligence agent in conjunction with a conspiracy to sedition conducted by a major political party against another major political party during a campaign, with the direct involvement of the FBI, involvement and support of the FBI, the DOJ, and the other organizations that we've already named, Fusion GPS and Perkins Coie, most notably. This is not just a statement that suggests that the entire Trump-Russia collusion scandal narrative investigation is a complete farce and that Mueller should be slap down now. But that a lot of people in some very high positions need to go to jail. Every single Democrat that tried to prevent the release of this memo needs to be on the chopping block this midterm. You cannot, your liberty, your freedom, and your children cannot afford for you to make the mistake of re-electing people who would suppress evidence of crime, especially of this magnitude. Because the Democrat National Committee was directly and financially involved in this crime, the likelihood that any high-profile elected Democrat was unaware of this activity is slim to none. And I imagine that a properly secured warrant to secure their email communications, text messages, and phone conversations, which should happen, will reveal a great deal of, and I say again, not collusion, conspiracy. This is sedition. And I want to be very, very clear. I have not said treason. I am not going to say that what has been done here by the Democrats is treason. I'm not sure if I'm willing to be that generous to Comey and the other signatories to the FISA warrant requests. But the members of the DNC that sought to suppress this memo are at least guilty of a conspiracy, a cover-up, and sedition. Those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure you smash that subscribe button, hit the bell notification so you catch me when I go live. And pop in on Sunday. We do the live show at 8 o'clock on Sunday. This Sunday we'll be talking a little bit about this again. We'll be talking a little bit about the State of the Union address. And I'm going to lay out, I'll lay out then that, and I'll throw you a little summary right now. Between this memorandum, old Chucky Schumer taking the weekend off over the DACA kids, Donald Trump's stellar performance at the State of the Union address, and Ginger Soy Boy Kennedy's limp-wristed bullshit response to the State of the Union address. Between those four factors, I think there's a silver lining here. We may actually have hope that the Democrats get a much-deserved, utter, and complete shellacking in the midterms this year. It's uncommon. It is uncommon for the minority party not to gain seats during a midterm election. Not this year. I would be surprised if they did not lose a shitload of seats. I love you. I'll see you on Sunday. And remember, until then, if you build a man a fire, you'll keep him warm for the evening. But if you set a man on fire, he'll be warm for the rest of his life. Good night.